The largest free trade area since the creation of the World Trade Organization is set to launch this July, the 7th. On tonight's Closing Bell, East Africa founder and CEO of Nazaru, Toyin Umesiri, joins us live from Chicago on why Africa and the rest of the world should trade with Africa. Thank you so much for getting time to speak to us, Toyin. Quickly, just let me understand, or let everyone that is watching CNBC Africa right now understand why they should do business or trade with the African continent.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is such a delight to be on your show. So when you think about what's happening around the world, while the rest of the world is actually shrinking in terms of, the British exit or the US-China trade war, Africa is actually positioning as the next economic frontier. So with the new Continental Free Trade Agreement, that creates the world's largest trade bloc. And this is a great time, for not just global players, but Africans in diaspora and even Africans all over the world need to be proud of what's going on in Africa. So the timing is right. And we also need to make sure we're inviting the rest of the world to be a part of this movement as we transform Africa.
Right. Toyin, there is something that has been going on for quite a moment now. We've been trying to understand, how does AGOA compare or outweighs with the AfCFTA?
So the way I would say it is, it's not either or, it's both. We need both to be activated.
Right.
One of the challenges that I've seen with AGOA in particular is that we failed to engage the private sector.
Right.
And I want us to make sure, as we're going on with the Continental Free Trade Agreement, we also realize that the people that actually would leverage this instrument of trade is the private sector. So the AU needs to engage the private sector in actualizing the Continental Free Trade Agreement.
Right, Toyin.
With AGOA, yes.
If you may allow me to jump in right there. We did see, if you followed Mo Ibrahim's conversation with African billionaire Aliko Dangote just recently. Dangote was saying that the day that Nigeria and Benin wakes up and make that corridor work, maybe there is a chance for the AfCFTA. South Africans are saying something different, Nigerians are saying something different. So how are we supposed to see this working out when the two biggest economies, literally the biggest economies in Africa, aren't on the same page?
I think the key is the private sector. Political policymakers can sit around the table, they can draft policies, they can design nice-looking policies. But in terms of lifting that policy and making it a real reality, and actually moving goods and services across borders seamlessly, the private sector must be brought to the table. That's the key. With AGOA, for example, the US market is open to products coming from Africa, right? For 18 years, the AGOA has sat on the books.
Right.
But what we found is that for 18 years, Africa and Africa's business, again, private sector, has not maximized that trade policy. So the key is, when you're designing the policy, it's not enough for non-business people to draft nice-looking policies. We must include and engage the private sector. I'm from the private sector. I worked for the world's largest corporation, Walmart, for several years. And when it comes to trade, really, you've got to roll up your sleeves and get the work done. What we do need the political side to do is remove barriers to trade. And that's when policies come in. Right. But those policies, again, needs to be brought to the table by the private sector and acted upon swiftly by the political side. We all have to work hand in hand.
Right, Toyin, we are looking forward, of course, to $5.6 trillion by 2025, of course, from the consumer and business spending around the region. Tell me, with the conversations that you're yet to have in Chicago with Trade with Africa Summit, how are you trying to see those conversations actually turn into business reality on the continent?
Yes, so the world is listening in. The world is looking at Africa right now and saying, what is going on in Africa? And they are also saying, what's in it for me? Okay, so in the previous narrative around Africa, it has focused mainly on foreign aid, right? We go to Washington, D.C., and we say, help, all of that narrative needs to shift from foreign aid, meaning people giving, towards the continent, to foreign trade.
Right.
And in the narrative around foreign trade, we want to make sure that each region, each leader, the African Union,
right,
is articulating what it wants from the global market and what the global market can get from Africa. I think that's where what we failed at. We failed to actually say, what do we want?
Right.
What does Africa want?